All right, good afternoon, listeners. Welcome to Lament of Hope blog and podcast. I'm excited today. I'm speaking with Valerie Tripp, who, especially for teen girls slash young adult girls, might remember these. I read a lot of these books growing up, but Valerie Tripp has written several of the American Girl books. She's written books for Felicity and for Josefina, Kit as well. I think some for Samantha and some others as well. But I wanted Valerie to come on just kind of talk about her writing, being a child's author, what attracted her to the American Girl books in particular to write about. So Valerie, I mean, just to start off, thank you so much for your time, first off.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Valerie, I want to ask you why American Girl series? What kind of attracted you to that? Because I mean, you spent a long time. You're writing a lot of these books. So you obviously had a passion for it. What kind of drew you to the subject matter?
I think we need to back up, Danielle. I met Pleasant Rowland, who's the creator of American Girl, in 1974. I had
Okay.
just graduated from college, and Pleasant and I worked together on a reading program uh, for pre-K through third grade called the Super Kids. And while we were working on that reading program, we worked together for probably about 10 years. And
Hmm.
while we were working on that program, we talked about the books that we loved as girls when we were growing up. Pleasant has two sisters and a brother. I have three sisters and a brother. And Pleasant and I agreed we liked the books where the girls were the protagonists. The girls got into mischief. The girls had the adventures, not the stories where the girls, like Tom Sawyer, where the girl, Becky Thatcher, just hangs back and mostly
Yeah.
cries. And we liked the books where the girls were causing the trouble.
Hmm.
So then I got married and moved to South Carolina, and Pleasant was married and moved to Wisconsin. She went to Williamsburg and just fell in love with Williamsburg, but felt that Williamsburg wasn't doing a particularly good job at telling its story to the young people who came
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
So then some time went by, and then Pleasant sent me a postcard saying, oh, she and I worked on a magazine, the prototype of a magazine for girls that was called Sunshine Magazine. And then Pleasant sort of put it all together. She was shopping for dolls for her nieces for Christmas and saw only Cabbage Patch and Barbie. And
Yeah.
she just had this incredible idea. She said it came to her all at once. So she wrote to me and she said, what if we had books about girls who lived in different periods of history? And the books would be about a girl who was 9 or 10 years old. And they would be written for readers who are 9 or 10 years old. And they'd have wonderful art. And there'd be a section in the back that had a nonfiction essay about that period in history. And also, based on that character, there would be dolls, and there would be clothes for the doll and furniture, and there would be clothes for the girl who was reading the book. And she just had this vision of how all of this
Hmm.
could work together. And that evolved into American Girl. So it wasn't that I was drawn to something that already existed. I was talking to Pleasant about what American Girl was going to be before American Girl existed at all.
Hmm.
So Pleasant and I sat down and we decided, okay, what are the periods of history that we would like to cover and what will be the shape of these books? And we decided on the 6 book format. And I always loved the way you could read about education over a long period of time by reading. Kirsten learned a lesson, Samantha learned a lesson, Molly learned a lesson. Or, of course, you could read the books horizontally and get to know the character. So Pleasant and I first planned the characters of Molly, who was growing up on the home front at the time of World War II, Samantha, who was growing up at the turn of the last century, where things were changing for women dramatically in the roles that they were taking on, and
Yeah.
Kirsten, an immigrant from, as it turned out, Sweden in 1854. And Pleasant asked me to write the descriptions of the first books about all of those characters. And then she said, okay, which one do you want to write about? Which one do you want to have be your girl? So I chose Molly. And the reason I chose Molly seems funny. Now I felt sorry for Molly. I knew that Kirsten would have nature itself as her antagonist, plus that bittersweet, heart-wrenching story that all of us can identify with, which is being an immigrant, moving,
Yeah.
leaving something behind. Whether you move one block or 1 million miles, it ends up being about the same feeling that
Yeah.
when you leave what's familiar to you. And then I also knew that Samantha was going to have all that gorgeous Edwardian Victorian art, architecture, clothing, and all of those incredible things that were happening for women, women getting jobs, women going to college, women getting fighting to have the vote. So I thought, oh, how can I'm going to choose Molly because it's going to be a challenge to make Molly's story compelling. I turned out to be totally wrong about that. It was a great pleasure to make Molly's story compelling. I adore Molly and love writing about Molly. And so I wrote about Molly. And then the person who was writing about Samantha went on to do other things. So I wrote about Samantha. And then after that, I did Felicity. And after Felicity, I did, well, I guess I sort of went back to Samantha for a while. And then I wrote about Josefina and Kit and Mary Ellen. And then the characters' best friends, Felicity's best friend, Elizabeth, Josefina's best friend, Mariana, um, Samantha's best friend, Nellie, Kit's best friend, Ruthie, Molly's best friend, Emily. And then from that, I went on to write the Hopscotch Hill School series for children just starting school, wrote that for American Girl, wrote stories and plays and nonfiction essays about all of the characters and the period of time they lived in. And most recently have written, I think it's 13 or 14 books in the Welly Wisher series.
Hmm.
So when you say what drew me to American Girl, it was more the question, a more apt question would be, what did I think American Girl could achieve? Why did I want to write about characters who lived in different periods of history?
Hmm.
And how did that turn out to be something that I feel was very important to devote my energies and interests and abilities toward? And the answer to that question is that I wanted and still want to say to girls, you're very important. I hear you. I'm listening to you. I'm taking you seriously. And I want to provide you with stories and nonfiction materials that will inspire you and fire you up and make you realize you are what American history is. You are more important than these fictional characters because you are real. And so, what an abundant and fruitful and challenging and delightful life it has been to write for American Girl for about all of those different characters and over a span of, oh gosh, I started in 1986. So I've been doing this for nearly 40 years now.
Is it, do you find it hard to find inspiration as you keep going, or is it
Not at
easier?
all, not at all.
Mm.
Danielle, the most wonderful thing happens. It turns out that the universe is just absolutely full of inspiration for you. And all you have to do is open your eyes and look at it. All you have to do is be observant. I mean, just a couple of days ago, I went to an elementary school and spoke to the third and fourth graders at that elementary school, came home. I couldn't drive home fast enough. They gave me so many fabulous ideas for stories. And,
Mm.
here they are in 2024. And yet, what they were talking about, the challenges that they're meeting in school, the way they feel about the world, what they want their own future to be, the way they feel about the earth and the environment, all of that is inspiration for me for the stories that I am writing about characters. I'm currently working on a book about my character who is growing up in the 1950s, Mary Ellen. And just there's no end to the inspiration. It's what you breathe in is inspiration. I just can't say enough about how important the children who read these books have turned out to be for inspiration. My own memories of growing up,
Mm.
everybody I meet, everybody I talk to, just what a joy it is. The universe is very abundant. There's no dearth of ideas. It's just you marshaling your energies to and disciplining yourself to communicate those great ideas and get your readers fired up too.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So even if the ideas come relatively quickly, because as you're saying, there's so much inspiration, do you find it, are you ever worried that a particular story is not going to attract the audience that you have, or?
My problem's almost the opposite in that I feel as though the toughest challenge for me as a writer is making choices because
Hmm.
I have to decide which, which branch, if you think of the story as a tree and you go up the trunk, and then which branch is going to be the most fruitful one for me to pursue. I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas. I love writing. I love words themselves. And
Hmm.
my problem isn't a dearth of ideas, it's always a plethora. And figuring out which one which is the best branch to pursue for this story. And don't worry, I can use that other idea, that other branch sometime in the future. So, no, I don't worry about that. I would say that I'm not going to claim anything remarkable for myself other than this. For some quirky reason, and I don't even know if this is something to be proud of, but it certainly has served me well. For some quirky reason, I'm not disconnected from my childhood. It's
Hmm.
not that I'm sitting here remembering what I was interested in when I was a child. I'm still interested in that. It's still very
Yeah.
present for me. It's like this wonderful, organic, very certain feeling that I have when I write a story. I know. I'm writing a story now, believe it or not. I'm writing an essay now where it's about the many uses of oil. And you might say, oh my gosh, that sounds like the most boring thing in the entire. No, it's not boring at all. Turns out there's oil in toothpaste, for Pete's sake. I know how to take something and make it of compelling interest to my reader.
Hmm.
And I don't know how I know how to do that, but for some reason I do, and I love doing it. Maybe that's how I know how to do it, because I love doing it.
Did you cultivate that, or did you always have that when you started
I,
out?
I don't know. That's a very good question. That's a very perceptive question. It could be just because I've been doing this for 50 years that was cultivating that interest. And other things, other interests, like for example, well, I don't know. I'm just whatever you ask me to write about, I can find a way to make that interesting to my readers, and I can find a way to make children interested and compelled. I was writing about ice age mammals, which, oh my gosh, what a fascinating topic. I was just writing about this last week. And it turns out in 2012, an 11-year-old boy was out walking with his two dogs, and he lives in Siberia, and they smelled something terrible. It turned out to be a woolly mammoth's leg sticking up out of the ground, and the permafrost and ice and the snow had all
Oh,
melted because of global warming. And this leg is with the hair on it and everything is sticking up out of the ground. Turned out to be one of the most important discoveries in paleontology ever. And an 11-year-old
wow.
year old boy made this discovery out for a walk with his two dogs. My heart beats faster when I read a thing like that, because I know that's a way to get every kid in the world interested in woolly mammoths. To say a kid just like you out walking with his dogs makes this incredible discovery. I mean, it still had
Wow.
its hair, it still had its claws, it still had its teeth, its blood, its organs, everything. And it had just been frozen in this pit for, I think it's 48,000 years. I mean, I
Wow.
just find that incredibly exciting. And I know that that's a way to get young readers interested as well. To say a kid just like you made this discovery. I love stuff like that.
Are
I
you
just love the way the universe is full of these great, great stories.
are you making an essay through the child's perspective, the 11-year-old boy, or?
I have a picture of him, yes, and I've read all the interviews with him that I can possibly find. This was 2012, so
Okay.
he's 13 years older than that now. He's 24, but and I haven't spoken to him directly. And these books, Danielle, this book is 12 pages long. I'm only allowed to use a fewer. I can't use more than 300 words. The whole
Okay.
point of these books is to interest children who are like 11, 12-year-old kid interest level, but a much lower reading level. And I love that challenge as well. So even the most distilled, the tighter the corner, the better I like it. The tougher the assignment, the more I like it. Um,
Yeah.
and I just love, love, love saying to children, look at this fabulous thing that happened, or look at this fabulous phenomenon, or you're not going to believe this ice age sloth was 20 feet tall. I just love saying, can you believe how cool this is? And sharing that excitement with my readers.
It's interesting like, do you find, because I know you're saying there's this plethora of ideas, which is true, but then what interests young readers changes a lot based on the culture or the time. And so there are, these commonalities for sure, but then there are these new topics and new conversations that young people are being introduced to. So do you find that you kind of immerse yourself? Like, how do you kind of stay up to date on the ways that might be interesting to young viewers, or, what is a young person thinking about? Or do you stick with the kind of universal emotions and problems that young people go through when you write your stories?
Well, one thing I'm always sure to do is spend as much time as I can with children of the age of my readers. As I
Mm,
said, for example, I was just speaking at this school to third and fourth graders last week. So if we're talking about nonfiction topics, those children had a lot to say about the environment. And when I told them, about these woolly mammoths, they were just fascinated. And when I talked to them about, different new kinds of green energy, for example, they're fascinated because that's very
mm,
interesting to them right now in 2024. However, your question is very thoughtful in that when I'm writing well, even a nonfiction essay, but it's probably most clear in a fiction story, I believe that all of us, all the time, no matter how old we are, we're all doing the same thing, which is we're trying to figure out, who am I as a unique individual?
yeah.
Who am I at? Maybe I learn in a way that's different from other people. Maybe I have a quirky ability to remember song lyrics. Maybe I'm just way taller than everybody else in my class. Who am I? What makes me different from everybody else? How can I embrace and celebrate that? And how can I use that responsibly to make the world a better place?
Hmm.
Who am I in the world as a unique individual and as a person who is part of my family, my class, my friendship circle, my soccer team,
Yeah.
my Girl Scout troop? I'm also a member of groups. And how can I bring who I am to bear fruitfully in those groups that I'm in?
Yeah.
Who am I all alone? And then who am I when I'm in that group? So I believe every single one of the American girls I wrote about, from Felicity, who lived, 250 years ago, to Mary Ellen, who lived only 50 years ago, or still alive now. Um, all our quest is the same. And I believe, I mean, all my women friends who are, I'm 72 years old, all of us are still talking about, okay, what is it that I can do? What is, no matter how small or invisible or unimportant it seems, but what can I do to make the world a better place? What unique ability or interest or quirky talent can
Yeah.
I use? And what joy there is in that discovery. What a wonderful thing that is to find out about yourself. I do feel the second part of it is very important, that we're all part of groups and we have a responsibility to be contributing, uh, helpful um, members of those groups. We're not just here to sit around. We're not just here to absorb,
Yeah.
use, take. Every single thing we take in, we then morph and use in our own unique way. And I'm pretty sure we're supposed to use that in service to
Hmm.
others. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that that's the purpose of life, actually, is for us to use our energies. And it may be in a very quiet way, maybe in an invisible way, maybe in a way that people are not going to see, or it may be in a big splashy way for a certain period of time. But
Hmm.
for our own selves, that's what I think that's what we're trying to find out. So your question is really excellent in that emotionally, I'm not sure that the task that a 9 or 10-year-old is faced with now is any different from a task that any 9-year-old has ever been faced with, which is,
Yeah.
what can I learn and then put to use? And then in terms of their interests, yes, isn't it fabulous the way the world has opened up? And I think children are far more aware of how small the globe is, really,
Yeah.
and how their actions have reverberations that they can't even see. Certainly, I mean, the environment is the most obvious. And I'm always very impressed when I meet with children and when they're taking this responsibility very seriously.
Well, it's interesting because as you're talking about these hard topics or even just complex topics, or these, deep questions, it seems like you really enjoy portraying them in like a very childlike and engaging way. I would say, it's interesting because I kind of, and this is my opinion, please feel free to say more, but um, I feel like the art of being able to write at a child's level in an engaging and almost innocent way without imposing too much of an adult view onto something is becoming less rare. I mean, it's becoming rare. Where it's like children grow up very fast in our world now. And so kind of getting to enjoy that childhood stage and all the elements that come with that, even in literature, I feel like is much more limited now than it was before. Um, so for you as you're writing, um, do you really enjoy and embrace that idea of presenting things in a very childlike way and almost in a gentle but soft way? Um, or do you find that hard as you're kind of competing with other offers and honestly, entertainment media where children are learning things at a very harsh, almost adult level sometimes?
Yes. And my question is, did that grow organically from their interests, or is this being imposed upon them from outside? And even the most well-meaning people, I think, sometimes write what I always think of as sort of spinach books, saying, I think children should be interested in this. But are they really? Are they
Hmm.
really? I like to think that what makes a book compelling to a child is a recognition. It resonates. It
Yeah.
resonates with them. They think, how did that author know? Yeah, that is something I'm wondering about. That is,
Yeah.
as opposed to, for example, telling girls that they should be interested in, I don't know, their appearance, or they should be measuring themselves, against other girls, or they should be interested in romantic relationships with boys. And they're thinking, I mean, I don't know about you, but I always thought, yikes, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of not.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really I'm interested in a lot of stuff, and I have friends who are boys. Some of my best friends were boys, but I just wasn't particularly interested in them romantically or anything. And so I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with reading ahead, skewing older, and thinking, okay, maybe when I'm 17 this will also be something that I'm very much worried about.
Yeah.
But um, I feel as though sometimes there's a disconnect between what's being created for children and kind of like well, you should be interested in this, and when they're really not
Yeah.
yet. And I think it's very interesting. I wrote a STEM series for National Geographic, and it was about girls starting middle school. They were just starting middle school, sixth grade, and they found these mysteries in their school building. They used their interests in science, technology, engineering, and math to solve the mysteries that they found happening in this school. And Oh my gosh, it was so wonderful. Came
Wow.
across, I just got to know this group of girls at a school nearby, and I called them my lunch bunch. And I would come with, cookies, and we would have lunch in the library, and they would talk about what was going on
Hmm.
among them personally as a group. And I could take that and put it, actually, I used it as a metaphor for the mystery that was going, if there was a chilliness, suddenly a chilliness in the group, I would, use that as a metaphor that the school was for some reason freezing. The heat wasn't working properly in the school. So I used what was happening with them emotionally. And those girls kept me so authentic,
Hmm.
so on target for sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. What they were worried about
Hmm.
forgetting their locker combination. They were worried about getting to class on time. They were worried about the beginnings of sort of different feelings towards boys. And that lunch bunch kept me authentic and honest. And what, if I tried to put something in the story, they would say, we don't actually care about that. Either it was too babyish or it was too advanced. So I feel a great responsibility to meet my writer, not even meet my reader where I am, to be inspired by my reader, to be sure that I'm honestly spending a lot of time with the children who are going to read the books that I'm writing. Um, and oh my gosh, Danielle, I can't say enough. A while ago, I wrote a book called Goddesses and Gardens, and I adapted the myth of Demeter and Persephone, Echo, and Circe. So I'm at an event at a school, and there's one boy who's throwing a ball against the wall. He's not listening to one word I'm saying, I don't think. After everyone has left, this boy comes up to me and says, don't you kind of feel sorry for Hades? Because he really loves Persephone, and now he's going to have to be without her for some of the months of the year. And
Hmm.
I thought, that's a perceptive thing to say. And I said, well, that's the deal that Hades and Demeter made. Persephone eats those seeds, pomegranate seeds. And so she, has to go away from her mother and live underground with Hades for a while. And this boy says to me, don't you think it should have been Persephone's choice? I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this boy. Look at the sensitivity. Look at the 2024 sensibility about women that this boy brought to that Greek myth.
Hmm.
I, I mean, all you have to do is spend time with the children who are reading your books, and you're
Yeah.
never going to run out of inspiration, ideas, and being blown away by their insights. Don't you just love that? Don't you just
Yeah.
love that 11-year
It's
old
really neat.
boy? Uh, come, no, I never thought of it from Hades' point of view. I never
Hmm.
did. I wrote that adaptation about Demeter during COVID. I hadn't seen my own daughter. My husband and I had not seen our own daughter for 18 months.
Wow.
All I was thinking about was poor Demeter hasn't seen Persephone for this period of time, just like poor old me. Never occurred to me to be sympathetic to Hades. I mean, can you see how much fun this is? Can you see how,
It is. Yeah.
rather than thinking, oh, what am I going to write about next? It's like, how can I get to this soon enough? How can I honor and celebrate and have other people see the wonderful thoughts and contributions that these children are making? Don't dismiss, I never dismiss any of the ideas that come from children. There's a great, great richness there.
It's interesting because your thoughts, Valerie, are awesome, but they're not common. So
Hmm.
I don't meet a lot of people. I mean, I guess if you were gonna say an older generation, enjoys kids, that's true a lot of the time, but that's just not, it's not carrying over.
Hmm.
It isn't carrying over to like my generation. There are so many people I've met who say, kids are annoying, or I really don't want to listen to what children have to say. What I have to say is, they don't say it that way, but their actions. And if you ask them about kids, it's like, no, they're annoying. I don't really want to spend time with children. Um, which is interesting because from what you're saying, like children get to give a unique perspective to life that kind of enhances your own view of it. Um, was there anything, you're mentioning your daughter. Do you remember a time where she said something as a young child that really maybe inspired you, if something you wrote or with the way you
Yes,
were looking at
she
life?
frequently did. You know, she grew up right with the American girls. And I remember very, very well when I was writing Josefina, my daughter Catherine was also turning 10 years old. And I realized she needed a different kind of mother. And that
Hmm.
formed the Josefina stories. In the Josefina stories, Josefina's mother has died, and her aunt comes to live with the family to help the sisters. Josefina has three sisters, and they're kind of in disharmony, just the way New Mexico was in disharmony because it had broken away from Spain, and so its government was in chaos. And so I used that metaphor and had Josefina's family be in chaos because the mother in the family has died. And that came from my observation of my daughter Catherine and her friends. Catherine didn't need me to tie her shoe or wipe her nose anymore. She needed me to stand back and say, "Yeah, okay, okay, you can do it. That's fine. Yes, you can. That's fine. Try it. You know, you can, if what you want to do is, be on the softball team, that's great. You go ahead, you do that. I'm not particularly sports oriented myself, but I'll make sure you get
Yeah.
there to every practice. And if that's fun for you to do, that's wonderful." So I had Josefina experience a mother who also says, "Oh, well, Tia Dolores stepping into the role of mother, saying, I believe in you. That's right. I trust you. You can do that." So yes, I my observations of my daughter and her friends always informed the books and the stories that I was writing. And then of course, sometimes I would just quote Catherine directly. In the Mary Ellen books, and this came from our life too. In the Mary Ellen books, Mary Ellen's mother, mothers are always just trying so hard. And she has promised to make a wedding dress for Mary Ellen's eldest sister, and things are not going well. They're just not going well. She's put the sleeves on upside down, and it's just really just not going well. And
Hmm.
one night, Mary Ellen comes out into the living room and sees her mother working by the little tiny light on the sewing machine, trying valiantly to fix these things. And Mary Ellen says to her mother, word for word, what my daughter Catherine said to me at the end of every softball practice. The parents were supposed to race the girls around the bases. And when I raced Catherine around the bases with her softball team, she beat me. She was crossing home base, and midair, she's 8 years old. In midair, she turns around and she says to me, "It's all right, Mom. You're good at other things." So I put that right in the Mary Ellen book, that Mary Ellen says to her mother, who's failing at sewing this wedding dress, "It's all right, Mom. You're good at other things." So, yes, observing my daughter, listening
Hmm.
to her friends, some of my most valuable research would happen when I'd be driving, Catherine and her friends to soccer practice, or picking them up after school, or they'd all be over here, eating pizza or making paper mache or whatever they were doing. And I would listen and observe. And some girls were very quiet and they were taking it all in. And then they would say something that would just blow your socks off because it would be so thoughtful and observant. And other girls were just fearless, rush ahead, fearless, woo, and so I
Yeah.
wanted to show that in what I wrote too. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. All of us morph. And I might be the quiet person at one gathering and then be the life of the party at another one. We all morph and change. None of us are stuck in only one way of being in the
Yeah.
world. We're
True.
all fluid, and from minute to minute, we change. And I wanted to show that as well.
Hmm. Well, Valerie, I have one more question for you. There's a lot of young people who want to be authors, and I specifically have some people in my audience who want to be children's authors. And it's really daunting and intimidating to them because, they get to see these really inspirational people like you and so many other authors who have written these really compelling children's books that now everyone remembers and loves and has had on their bookshelf. And they too, want to be able to make an impact in some way and be able, a lot of them would love to be able to, make it their job, which it's sad because, unless you're a really prolific writer, a lot of times writing is on the side for a while until it can become something that you can financially support yourself. But how would you encourage, people who are aspiring to be a children's writer? What are some tips that you can give them?
The first thing I would say is you're already a writer. If you write, you are a writer. There is a difference. I'm not being disingenuous. I know there's a difference between being a published author and a writer, but you are a writer. Know that about yourself. If you love to write, you are a writer. And nothing you do is ever wasted because you, as a writer, are in the world in this wonderful, wonderful way where everything that happens to you matters. Standing in the grocery line, overhearing a conversation, that's work for you. That's inspiration for you.
Hmm.
You are open to the universe and you realize the universe is abundant. I don't need to be worried that my imagination is going to run dry. Your imagination's never going to. I promise you, your imagination will never run dry if you nourish it. And here's how you nourish it: you
Hmm.
nourish it by having adventures, you nourish it by laughing so hard with your friend that you're out of breath, you nourish it by reading every single thing you can get your hands on, by
Hmm.
going to plays, reading poetry, feeling your brain stretch where you go, wait a minute, I'm not sure I even understand this, but I'm going to open myself up to it.
Hmm.
So, as a writer, it's just the most wonderful way of being in the world because everything you do, everywhere you go, every person you meet, you're observing that person, you're enjoying that person, you're remembering something about that person, and you're going to put that to use to enchant and delight and educate whoever reads what you end up writing. And I would say, please don't let the world discourage you. Please don't.
Hmm.
If you could see, Daniel, if you could see how many books and stories I have written that never saw the light of day because they just weren't good enough, it's stunning. Let's just say it's stunning. All of us. That's one of the things I actually like about being a writer is that you're starting from zero every single time. When I
Hmm.
sit down to write about the woolly mammoth, I'm exactly where any writer who's only 18 years old is the same place. We're starting with a blank page and we're going to do our utmost. We're going to do our best to write something that is interesting, fun, and funny about woolly mammoths.
Hmm.
We all start at the same place with the blank page. And that's a challenge, but it's also a tremendous gift. It's a tremendous gift to be the person who is right there at the very beginning. It's scary. It's
Yeah.
scary. But please, I would just want anybody who wants to write for children especially to realize everything you do every day is your material and you are already a writer. There's no magic thing about being published. If you write, you are a writer, and respect that about yourself and love that about yourself and celebrate that about yourself and live that truth. That's what I would say.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much. And for listeners, again, this has been for me such an encouraging and intriguing interview, getting to talk about children's literature and getting to hear Valerie's thoughts on American Girl books she's written and how to incorporate your imagination in writing. Um, but Valerie, thank you so much. It's been such a gift and an encouragement to speak with you.
Danielle, I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this, and I must compliment you on your wonderful questions, both the ones you sent to inspire me and then also the ones that you asked today. What an honor it's been to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome.